But let's just kind of dive in. We do our kind of scouting of the teams that the Knicks play. Let's just talk Nets and Bucks. The Nets are the first opponent coming up. The Nets are interesting. I don't know if I have a lot to say about the Nets, but a few things to say about the Nets. I've been trying to watch them recently, and they haven't been amazing recently, but they were really good earlier in the season, I would say, especially offensively. I think they're better than their record. I just want to say the Nets have Lonnie Walker, Dorian Finney-Smith, Royce O'Neal, Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas. Those guys are all shooting the lights out, and everybody who listens to Hot Hand Theory knows I love me some three-point shooting. Those guys are all shooting ridiculous percentages from three. The Nets are sixth in the NBA in three-point frequency, third in the entire NBA in three-point shooting accuracy, shooting 39% as a team, which is crazy. So I really appreciate the style that the Nets are playing with. They have all of these wings who can all shoot and score, and they're taking advantage of that to create great spacing. Dinwiddie creates a ton of those threes for them. He runs a bunch of pick and rolls. He runs a bunch of ISOs. And they really have just like three guys who touch it a lot. It's Dinwiddie, Cam Thomas, and Mikal Bridges. Those are the kind of three that really touch the ball primarily. The rest of the guys are all spacing out and shooting. 11th offense in the league. I think they have a bit of a higher ceiling just based on the shooting. They've kind of been on a slide offensively lately. But I really like watching the Nets because they're playing a style that I really appreciate. Take a bunch of threes and make a bunch of threes. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention about the Nets on the other end is can someone explain how they found Day'Ron Sharpe while already having Nick Claxton? Like I don't, is that fair? Like I don't understand. Day'Ron Sharpe has been incredible defensively. Is a monster on the boards. Maybe not quite as good as a rim protector as Nick Claxton, but is very effective there as well. Just ridiculous that they have those two guys as their center rotation. But I think the Nets are dangerous, and I don't think it's a walk in the park to play against them for anybody because they can shoot the lights out, and we know that's subject to high variance. If all those guys hit a bunch of threes, they're beating any team in the NBA. And I think they have a decent defensive ceiling as well, besides the fact that all the wings and guards that I mentioned are not the best defenders besides Mikal. Cam Johnson hasn't been as good as he's been in the past. Royce O'Neal hasn't been as good as he's been in the past. DFS, who should be a really good defender, hasn't been as good as he's been in the past. Cam Thomas is a turnstile completely, and Dinwiddie is a bad defender as well. So, but I think that they have a higher ceiling than how we've seen them perform, and I think that they're a dangerous team for anybody on any given night.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I look when you have a volatile strategy in terms of shooting a ton of threes, you can beat anybody on a night because you can get hot on any night. I know that's pretty simplistic analysis, but the Nets, similar to the Knicks, have two centers that they're going to keep on the court at all times, and they're just going to surround them with shooters. The Sharpe thing is very, very interesting to me. He's one of, he's plus 10 per 100 when he's on the court. By far the best on the Nets. They're absolutely crushing teams when he plays. Obviously, they're losing when he sits. It's not like the Nets are some super team. If they were plus 10 per 100 when he played and also winning the minutes he sat, they'd be one of the best teams in the league. EPM loves a couple of Nets players, Bridges, Dinwiddie, and Claxton. It's too bad Mitchell Robinson's out. That Claxton-Mitchell Robinson matchup is always a lot of fun. Look, I don't want to do what I did last week with Talen Horton-Tucker and deride somebody and then watch him as he goes off on the Knicks. I don't know. I don't want to do that to the Knicks again. But I have to say I've never really been the biggest Cam Thomas fan. And to me, he represents what we were talking about earlier in terms of points probably get overrated. And that's all he does. He provides very, very little impact outside of the points he puts in the basket. And when he's scoring, that means other players who might be doing other things either aren't on the court or either aren't scoring either. EPM hates Cam Thomas. So I guess this is my way of saying bet Cam Thomas's overs Wednesday night. But I do think that the best version of this Nets team has Dinwiddie carrying a high usage, and then a couple wings who are willing shooters playing off him with Claxton or Sharp down low. The thing that always troubles the Knicks specifically is when a team doesn't have somebody that you can ignore. Tom Thibodeau plays a very exploitative style of defense. He is at his best when he can take away another team's best player using help and recover schemes. And the Nets, at least right now, don't really have that option. Of course, neither Claxton nor Sharp is much of a shooting option, but Thibodeau doesn't really ignore big men just because they don't shoot. He's too afraid of offensive rebounds and of baskets around the rim. And aside from those guys, the Nets are pretty much always going to be deploying guys who are willing shooters. I expect the Dennis Smith Jr. minutes to be the ones the Knicks can attack, not because Smith Jr. isn't a good player, but specifically Thibodeau will look to help off of him and be willing to live with Dennis Smith Jr., shooting open threes. And the Knicks will be at the mercy of the volatility of those threes. I'm more curious about the Nets long term to move away from this matchup specifically and talk more. Like, I don't really know what direction they're headed in, and I'm curious what you think of that, because aside from Mikal Bridges, they don't really seem married to any particular player. I don't think the Knicks are, we talked about this guy earlier, I don't think the Knicks are going to be in the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes. Does it just feel inevitable that Mitchell ends up in Brooklyn? That has to be the most likely outcome, right?
Donovan Mitchell is a perfect fit in Brooklyn, in my opinion. I think he works seamlessly with Mikal Bridges, is obviously a better creator than anybody that they have on the team. I mean, Spencer Dinwiddie has looked like an offensive star on very low efficiency. And that's because there's so much space on the court when all those guys are spacing out. Like they play at the 4, Dorian Finney-Smith, who is shooting, last time I checked, 44% from 3 this year on high volume. The spacing's incredible on that team, and they have guys who can attack the basket ferociously at the 5, who are either going to get offensive rebounds or are going to dive or are going to be in the dunker spot and be able to fill space when Dorian Finney-Smith when Spencer Dinwiddie gets into the paint. So if Spencer Dinwiddie is able to look as he's looked on, again, low efficiency, not a threat from 3 really, like a sketchy shooter, can be hot, run hot or cold. If he's able to be as good as he's been, as effective as he's been as a creator, imagine what Donovan Mitchell would do with this kind of surrounding squad. I don't know what they would have to give up to get him, but I think that's the perfect fit. And I think that would make this Nets team very dangerous moving forward. I also think that Nick Claxton is, I'm not sure if I would go as far as to say this, but Day'Ron Sharp may be making Nick Claxton expendable. And Sharp played, he hasn't, up until this season, he hasn't been healthy. And so we haven't really got to see what he has. I mean, last year, I think he played 50 games or something like that. The year before, I know he played 32 of 82 games. He's been kind of up and down, but this year we're seeing him put it all together. He's 22 years old. I think he's a good player. I think he's really good, and I think that we could see Nick Claxton become expendable. So that I don't know what his value would be as a 5, a really good, strong defensive 5 who has a good impact on the offensive end due to his efficiency and his ability to get offensive rebounds and attack the basket. But I'm not sure if he has value, but to me, their future is Bridges and a guy like Donovan Mitchell and the wings that they have around him, as defensive wings and as shooters. I think that that's a really good team. If they can hold on to Cam Johnson, they can hold on to Mikal Bridges, potentially hold on to DFS and, one of their centers and a guy like Donovan Mitchell. I think that's a really good team. So to me, I think this Nets team actually has a really good upside.
Well, if they're going to trade for Mitchell, they have to trade something. I'm not sure
Yeah.
what they would. I'm not sure what they would trade, but it would. But I think they will also have a lot of leverage. Like if Cleveland gets to the point where they're like, "Oh shit, we're not keeping Mitchell," you have to imagine they'd at least feel out the market. Um, and I do think Mitchell wants to ultimately be in New York. My guess is he wants to be a Knick, but I don't know if the feeling's super mutual. I think with Brunson, the Knicks would be correctly, by the way, a little weary about pairing Mitchell with Brunson because there's a lot of redundancy in the strengths and weaknesses. So I think Brooklyn's going to end up the overwhelming favorite, and I have to agree with you that if you just start with the core of Mitchell, Bridges, and Cam Johnson, that's going to be really good. If you have Mitchell, Bridges, Cam Johnson, and a center that's producing like Claxton or Sharp, that's going to be really good. And I think, I should have mentioned this earlier, and I'll be curious to hear what you think about this. As impactful as Gobert was with Mitchell, something that my brother talked about all the time is that there's an interconnectivity between the impact that two guys like that can make. And an example he often used, he used two examples, the 2001 Sixers and the 2011 Bulls. And if you were to look at the analytics of both of those teams, Allen Iverson won MVP, Derrick Rose won MVP in 2011, and Iverson won in 2001. But if you look at the analytics, most stat junkies would say, well, they actually won because of defense. And Rose and Iverson were not the strongest defenders on either of those teams. They were both top seeds because they had the best defenses in the league. But my brother would always argue that, well, these defenders are allowed to be their most impactful, the most impactful versions of themselves, because there's an elite scorer who can carry a super high usage and drag an offense to even mediocrity. That allows flawed defensive heavy players to be the best versions of themselves. So, as much credit as I do want to give, Gobert for those Jazz teams, and even as much as the data can tell us that, hey, the Jazz did fine when Gobert played and Mitchell didn't, I think in the macro sense, you have to give Mitchell at least a little bit of credit for for not allowing Gobert's offensive weaknesses to have a bigger light shown on them. Because if they had a worse offensive creator as their best player, I think all of a sudden Gobert might have some more responsibilities and he might hurt the team more. And to bring this back to the Nets and their potential, bringing Mitchell on board, Claxton is a very limited offensive player. He can pretty much only dunk, and, he has a little baby hook with his left hand, but you don't want him doing more outside of that. And he has a very high defensive ceiling. If all of a sudden you bring a guy like Donovan Mitchell in, he's going to allow Claxton to be the best version of himself because he takes all of those responsibilities away from flawed offensive players. So I think that we could see the Nets take a big leap forward if they were able to get Mitchell and not give up too much.
I totally agree with that analysis and evaluation. I totally agree. I think that it's almost like you have a flawed. It makes sense. You have a flawed defensive player and an incredible offensive player, and then you have a flawed offensive player and an incredible defensive player. Like, you think those two might go well together? Like, I think, but it's even like you explained. Like, it's not just that they're flaws, that they cover up for each other's flaws, that they allow each other's strengths to blossom as well. Like, it's there's space, right? It's almost like when you do sound engineering or something like that, and you are doing sound mixing, there's frequencies that you have to blend with one another. So in order to have the lows be able to shine through of the kick drum, you have to like make sure that the lows of the other instruments are kind of reduced. So you can pull down those frequencies on those other instrumental sounds, and you can let the lows from those the sounds that you really want the lows from, the kicks, the bass drums, you can let those really shine through. And it's necessary to have that push and pull, that dynamic where you drop the lows on one and you are able to let the lows shine through on those others, and that's necessary, or else everything's going to get really really muddy. And that's the synergistic effect that you're kind of describing, I think, in a basketball game as well. So you kind of almost have to have that in order to have guys really maximize their strengths on either end. And so I really like when teams are built that way. And also, like, I mean, yeah.
Can I just get in here? Actually,
For sure.
I'm sorry. I just want to say it works the other way too. Like if Mitchell's a flawed defensive player, having someone who doesn't force him, who doesn't amplify, maybe Mitchell's not the best example because I know people like his defense when he's locked in, but over the totality of a season, he's never been super impactful. But if you have an offense heavy defense light player, having a guy like Gobert or Claxton or Mitchell Robinson who can disallow the opponent from amplifying those deficiencies, that is equally impactful. And I do think we have to emphasize both equally. It's not just the offensive player who's helping elevate the defensive player. It works vice versa too.
Yep. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It works both ways. And I think it really works. And I think it's a great way to build a team. So in essence, I would totally agree with you. I think it's a great dynamic to have with either Claxton or Sharp and Mitchell. But then the fact that the wings are all really good defenders that the Nets have, and even if they have to give a couple of them up, they still have other ones that are going to be really good. So I think the Nets, I think if the Nets, are able to give up picks and kind of some of the ancillary wings that are high value wings, honestly, I know a lot of people like Cam Johnson. Even if they gave up Cam Johnson and the picks and another pretty high value player, I think that would still be a great Nets team with Donovan Mitchell, just because of the synergistic effects that we're talking about. So I think that's a great future for them if they are able to pull that off.
And to flip it on its head, or to look at the other side, the Cavs have to get what they can for Mitchell. If they lose Mitchell for nothing, they're going to take a pretty big step back. If they got Cam Johnson and picks, and all of a sudden they're running Garland, Strus, Cam Johnson, Mobley taking a step forward, and Allen, I actually don't think they'd take as big a step back as people would predict. I think they'd be just fine. I don't think the ceiling for this Cavs team is super high anyways. So I think they'd maintain close to a similar ceiling and just as high a floor, because they'd still have a bunch of really good players in their lineup that fit together really well. They'd have shooting, they'd have defense, they'd have initiate. Like Garland it would allow Garland to take a step forward in a similar way that Maxey has without Harden. So it wouldn't surprise me if a Cavs Nets trade ends up being one of those that helps both teams move forward.
I think that's a great point. Garland has had a relatively down year so far, and I also could see that same leap forward from him, in the absence of Mitchell, kind of surrounded by more ancillary pieces who are going to shoot and play defense. A guy like Cam Johnson, I think, would work really well for that dynamic. I'm always going to say this, but I don't think the Mobley Allen thing is. I think the Mobley Allen thing puts a really hard ceiling on the team. I just don't think that's ever going to work like long term. But that's my personal philosophy. So I could be disproven on that, obviously, but I don't think that's a long term solution.
Mobley has to just become a better shooter if he's going to play more power forward. In today's NBA, it's just an untenable situation. He has to be able to shoot. So I agree with you. I also think the offense defense thing we were talking about is a great way to lead into the Bucks. I mean, if you're a Knicks fan listening to this, you know what the story is with the Bucks. We've played them. The Knicks have played them 3 times already. Or wait, have they played them 3 or 4 times? 3. Yeah, 3 times already.
3. It's 4. Number 4 and 5 coming up.
It's insane. And I don't think there's a more perfect marriage of offense and defense than Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think that's as synergistic as 2 superstars can be, unless it involves Steph Curry. And I think the Bucks are finally starting to round into form and playing really, really well on both sides of the ball. I think the Knicks are in for they're going to have their hands full, even though they'll be at home. I don't expect it to be. Easy is the wrong word, But I think both games in Milwaukee. I know the Knicks ended up getting killed in Milwaukee when the Bucks hit a million threes. I don't think that's reflective of who the Bucks are. I think that was just an outlier level shooting night. But I think when you watch both of those games, it would be easy to watch and be like, like the Knicks are actually on this team's level. And I don't think it'll be that if the Bucks are healthy and playing in New York. I think the Knicks are going to have their hands full. I think they're going to have to play really well to beat the Bucks. What do you think?
I think the Knicks are going to get swept across 2 games. I hate to say it, but the Bucks are just, you talked about the synergy between offense and defense. They are on offense the powerhouse that we thought they'd be coming into the season. Like, they are shaping up to be that. And we had talked about them, before the Knicks in-season tournament game. And I did not expect the Knicks to win that game because the Bucks offense was already showing signs of being just too potent. Then since that game, they've absolutely dominated their opponents, like completely crushed everybody on the offensive end. Besides Indiana, ironically, which is it's kind of funny, but put up 145 points per 100 possessions against the Knicks, which is ridiculous. Like I said, the aforementioned Indiana, they played, okay, 114 per 100. Then 122 per 100 against Chicago, 128 per 100 against Indiana again, 144 against per 100 against Detroit, and 128 per 100 against Houston. Just completely steamrolling everyone on the offensive end. The effective field goal percentages have been off the charts. Damian Lillard is shaping up. He is, on a really very much a linear trajectory with regard to his offensive impact. Excuse me, with regard to his offensive impact, and he has been really incredible over the last 10 games or so. I don't have his specific stat line over those 10 games, but I know he's been awesome. And their defense is holding it down. Their defense is doing enough. Their defense hasn't been great, but obviously you have Giannis and Brook Lopez. You're going to have a solid defense, and they've been doing enough. But offensively, they've just been a complete juggernaut. And despite the games being at home for the Knicks, I just think that that's going to be extremely tough. Over the last 2 weeks, the Bucks have the second best offense in the NBA, 130 points per 100 possessions. Only behind the LA Clippers, and they also have the 5th best point differential, plus 11 over those 2 weeks. So, yeah, I just think this is a juggernaut. This is the team that we were worried about. And to be honest with you, I think that they're getting better. I think that their offense is kind of locked in, but I think their defense is going to get better and has room to increase. I think Dame Lillard has room to improve in terms of his offensive impact. We saw last year we had one of the best offensive impact seasons in the history of the game, in the top maybe 20 or 30, something like that. So yeah, this is a juggernaut. I think that they're going to be a problem for literally anyone, including the Boston Celtics, including the Sixers, or including Minnesota, who has a great defense. I just think this is a monster.
Yeah, I'm still I'm still not fully sold that there'll be a problem for Boston. I have to see it. I think Boston is. I think this is the biggest edge the best team has had on the league since the Warriors. I just think the Celtics are so much better than everybody else, and it's going to take an injury or crazy volatile shooting luck to beat them, because or lack of luck on the Celtics end, because they rely on the three a lot. I think that, and I know I'm going to get back to the Bucks here, but I just think the Celtics are a perfect team, and they're perfectly synergetic. I cannot be higher on them. I think you could make an argument that they should have at least 3 All-Stars right now, from an impact perspective. And it's funny, I think they might get 3, but I think Jaylen Brown might be one of the 3.
That's ridiculous. I don't get me started on Jaylen Brown being the 3rd guy of that squad. Anyway, go ahead, proceed.
Yeah, you're good. I think if you listen to this weekly, you might remember me saying last week that I think that Anthony Davis is the key to the Lakers, because I trust LeBron's impact to be so consistent and so reliable that it actually is going to be Anthony Davis and how good he plays and how consistent his impact is that determines the ceiling. In a weird way for the Bucks, I think their X factor is Chris Middleton. I know that he's playing limited minutes right now as he continues to try to get healthy and come back from his injury. He's been really, really good in limited minutes. His impact has been really high, and the minutes that they've played with him on the court have been great. I think Lillard and Giannis are going to be Lillard and Giannis pretty much no matter what. I think save some 3-point luck swings from Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez defense and what he does is going to be consistent no matter what. If the Bucks are going to contend with Boston, I think Middleton has to be the key. I think that if Middleton can be the player he was even 2 seasons ago before he got hurt, and he can be that great third banana and, more importantly, a second option behind Damian Lillard. I know that sounds crazy to say because Giannis is Giannis, but I still think that when the game gets tight, you just don't want Giannis initiating from the top of the key. I don't think that is a good proposition for a team. I think you want Giannis being, playing with an advantage, and Lillard can create that advantage. And there was a time when Middleton could too, when defenses were bent and Middleton was getting the screen from Giannis. That was a great duo. And if Middleton can get back to that, I would be more open to saying I think the Bucks could give the Celtics a series.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of pulled the words out of my brain. I do think it comes down to Middleton as well for this Bucks team as well in terms of whether they're able to compete. I will say I largely agree with you on the Celtics. Everyone knows I love the Celtics. I love how they've constructed that team, especially on offense. But on defense is something that you pointed out before the season started about how the defensive end would kind of make or break what the ceiling of the team would be, and their defense has lived up to the kind of the best that you could have expected for them. I do think the Celtics have a higher ceiling. I think this is the year for the Bucks is because they're all in this year. Like Dame is 34, Middleton's working his way back. He's 32. He's like an old 32. Like everybody on that team is in their 30s. Everybody who plays minutes on that team is like in their 30s. Besides like Malik Beasley, who's not the youngest guy either. I think they're all in on this year, and we're seeing it. We're seeing Giannis play the most minutes per game that he's played in like the last 7 years or something like that. And also not missing any games. I think he might have missed one game. And I think they're also saving Middleton. I really think they're saving Middleton for later in the season, and they're letting him work his way back slowly. So I just think they haven't really shifted into the high gear yet. I think we're seeing the Celtics kind of humming along and being what they're going to be. But I think the Bucks have a level to get to that we haven't even seen yet, especially when Middleton is back and actually playing 33 minutes per game at his highest level. I mean, offensively, he's been tremendous so far, and I don't think he's all the way back yet. So, and again, like I said, I think Dame has upwards momentum to go. I think Giannis is really kind of carrying them early on in the season. And I just think that they have more room to go, and I think this is the year for them to kind of make that push. I think Boston has a higher ceiling, but I think that the Bucks are going to be a problem for everyone and anyone. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
One other player to mention is Malik Beasley, who's playing good defense and shooting 46% from 3 on 6.5 threes a game.
Yeah.
He matters. And to sort of put a bow on this, and I just want to mention the PvP data. So the Bucks with Giannis on the court and neither Damian Lillard nor Chris Middleton on the court, beating teams by 14 points per 100 possessions. Giannis is still really good and can do a lot. Now, flip that, and you have Damian Lillard without Middleton or Giannis. The Bucks are losing those minutes by almost a point per 100 possessions. So that's a 14-point differential. But, and here's the big but here, put Chris Middleton on the court next to Damian Lillard and take Giannis off, and the Bucks net rating is plus 14 or plus 13.92 per 100 possessions, almost exactly equivalent to what they're doing with Giannis on the court without the other two. So Damian Lillard's a great player, but he's not Giannis Antetokounmpo. And if they can get to a point where once they start rotating and they're substituting in a game, and their two outside of the starting lineup, their two main units are Giannis with bench players and then Lillard plus Middleton and bench players, they're going to be humming at all points in the game. They're going to be really good for 48 straight minutes. They're going to have a lot of good players playing. So again, this is all to back up the point that Middleton is just going to be everything to this team, and they need him to be playing at his best self.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the last thing I just want to say is that I've seen some of that data about Dame. This is kind of my point. Dame, according to EPM, in terms of his impact, this is his worst offensive season in 10 years. This is his worst offensive season since he's been 24 years old. We have not seen the Damian Lillard that we're going to see later in the season. We just haven't. And honestly, I mean, I'm going to come back on Hot Hand Theory, maybe episode 21, and I'm going to have to clip this clip and reinsert it back into the episode, because Dame is going to be playing at an astronomical level later in the season. And it is going to seem like, how did we think that anybody could stop this Bucks team? Because this Dame is like, oh yeah, that's Dame. Yeah, he's pretty good. Yeah, he's really good. Wow, he's really impactful. Yeah, oh, that guy's dangerous. This is not Damian Lillard that we've seen over the last 10 years, which has been one of the best offensive players in the history of basketball. And I think he's going to get back to it. And when he does, I don't know how you stop this team. So that's why I think that they have such an incredible ceiling.
So for anyone out there, if you want to keep receipts, right now Lillard's offensive EPM is plus 4.1. So, if you want to track that and make fun of XJ when Damian Lillard gets worse because he's falling off a cliff, please feel free to do that.
Yes, please do that. I would love if you kept the receipts and spammed my inbox about it. But yeah,
everybody knows how high I am on receipt culture. I love that so much. I hate when people like evolve their way of thinking and are closed-minded. I hate that, or are open-minded. Excuse me.
I'm going to write this down. Another topic: receipt culture. Our different perspectives on it, because this needs to be unpacked. It just does.
So fucking infuriating, dude. I was on the post game last night, and some dude was just literally blowing. Second time this week, by the way, that I've just been harassed by some random person that I've never met. Some dude was blowing up our chat with why are you saying these good things about Randall? You hate Randall. He doesn't try. And it's I don't understand. I don't understand what you want from me. When Randall's out there playing bad, should I just be I'm just not going to say anything?
Stop observing it. Stop observing and reporting what you're seeing. Don't do that anymore.
Toxic negativity. You cannot do that. You can only be positive about the NBA team you root for, folks.
Yep. That's the toxic positivity, you should say. But yeah, totally.
No, I'm saying in my case, it was.
In your case, it's toxic.
Yeah, I'm the toxic negative Nancy.
On that toxic note, we will end the Hot Hand Theory podcast. This was a great episode. We got to talk about a lot. Glad that you are with us. Please leave a like. Please subscribe to the podcast. For more stuff, we have a lot more coming. Future episodes are going to be tremendous. We have some guests coming up, some surprise special guests, and a lot more to talk about the kinds of analytics talk and film talk that Geoff brings to the table. So super happy that you're with us for it. Like and subscribe. This has been Hot Hand Theory.